Hello everyone and welcome to the 17th episode of Italian Politician of the Week. Once again, I won't be talking about a single politician this week, more like several people that found themselves in the clusterfuck that is currently happening in the Jole region of Calabria. I decided to cover this topic due to popular demand, but also because whatever is happening there is definitely worth sharing. Let's start. This is Italy, and this is Sweden, but nobody gives a shit. Okay, no, for real. This is Italy, and at the bottom of it, we have the region of Calabria. Calabria is, how do I explain it? Just like most southern regions, it is very territorially challenged. I guess that is the politically correct way to say it. Reality is that due to its geographical location, relatively low population, the lack of natural resources that promote economic development, and the long history involving organized crime, Calabria has been for most of its modern existence left to fend off by itself. When you compare Calabria to the other southern regions, there is not much that stands out. Sicily has a very rich economy, and even though it has a similar history involving mafias, it is far from underdeveloped and it has a higher population. Basilicata has gotten a lot more national and international interest after oil was found and Matera became a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Apulia, while it has still a problem with crime, is blessed with a higher standard of living due to the efforts made by the regional governments to expand state-owned fields such as infrastructure, welfare, trash recycling, and to some extent education. Finally, Campania, arguably the richest of them all, still has a big problem with corruption, but it is cracking down on organized crime, has very high population and a lot of economic potential. So what does Calabria have that others do not? One of the few upsides of Calabria is that since it's not very developed economically, it is blessed with very low amounts of pollution. The beauty of the coastline of places like Tropea or Soverato is unparalleled, not to mention the beautiful inland countryside in the province of Cosenza called Sila. Nature is just as untouched as everything else in Calabria. The few resources it has, as well as public works and businesses operating in Calabria, are handled in one way or another, either by force or fear, by the 'Ndrangheta, the local mafia, which has a very unspellable name. A few years ago, it was estimated that 'Ndrangheta actually earned the same as McDonald's, which is just absurd. What allowed the 'Ndrangheta to reach such levels of influence, power and wealth in the region is, ironically enough, the regional government itself, that after decades of indifference towards them has become virtually powerless. The geography of the region doesn't make things easier. Traveling in Calabria is significantly harder than in any other region due to the mountainous terrain and thick forests in the central regions. This creates a lot of isolated communities where the 'Ndrangheta can operate freely. Due to the tragic situation, politicians in Calabria, in order to actually do things, have two choices: either join the 'Ndrangheta or work with them indirectly. Of course, that is not legal nor ideal, but being a puppet state apparently is the only way, or at least the only way that does not put you or your family at risk. For that reason, for as long as I can remember, every regional governor of Calabria has been accused and often convicted of working with these groups. This only makes the people of Calabria distrustful towards their own institutions and of course stops the growth of the region, which has been stagnant for decades now, though things seemed a bit brighter when Jole Santelli won the presidential elections of January 2020. Jole Santelli was born in 1969 in Cosenza. She graduated in law at Sapienza University in Rome and joined Forza Italia in 1996. She was elected into parliament in 2001 and she was re-elected ever since. At the time of her election, she was the party secretary of Forza Italia in Calabria and the vice president of the Parliamentary Commission Against Organized Crime. She also worked at the Ministry of Justice and Employment during Berlusconi's Berlusconi's governments. While she was in Rome most of the time, she never lost touch with her home, so she was thrilled when Berlusconi suggested her to candidate to the presidential elections. Even though she was ecstatic, she was unsure, since she had been diagnosed with cancer just a few years earlier. She was, however, healthy and candidatable according to doctors, and so she ran and won with 55% of the votes. I think that her clean background and tenacity inspired many people in the region to vote for her. She was also doing a pretty good job with the whole pandemic situation. Thankfully, Calabria had a very mild first wave, partly because she chose to close down early and was among the first to reopen, which is impressive. Things were looking up for Calabria and Santelli. Polls gave her a 61% of approval in September, which was higher than Conte, our prime minister at the time, who just had 49%, which is still pretty high, but still. But then suddenly and tragically, on the 15th of October, she died of a stroke in her own home in Cosenza. It was a shocking event not only for Calabria and Forza Italia, but also for the whole country. However, the mess had just started. According to Calabrian law, in the event of the absence of a president, the vice president is in charge, though in case of death, a new election must be held within 60 days, though due to the current historical events, it will probably be longer than that. The vice president is a certain Antonio Spirli, who until now was virtually unknown, aside for a few unpopular opinions he shared in the past. He is from Lega for a reason. He is a bit of an anomaly, because he is also openly homosexual and strongly against political correctness, even referring to himself as a faggot in many occasions. Shortly after Santelli's departure, things spiraled out of control. The number of COVID-19 cases skyrocketed, and since the public healthcare could not handle the new wave, the region was forced into shutdown. This brings us to the appointment of the emergency COVID commissioner of Calabria. Saverio Cotticelli was the Commissioner of Healthcare at the time of the spike. In June, he was supposed to make a plan to reform the healthcare system in the case of a second wave, which he didn't. On the 7th of November, he was interviewed by Rai, who wanted answers. Turns out that Cotticelli actually had no idea that he was supposed to make a plan of his own, and he was heavily criticized for it. Turns out that he did not even know how many intensive care setups the region had in total. Conte would demand his resignation as soon as possible. In a region where literally nothing works and the institutions are the Andrangheta's bitch, you can imagine that there was a huge line made out of people hoping to be nominated to the position. In mid-November, the Council of Ministers met and appointed Giuseppe Zuccatelli. Zuccatelli was picked by Minister of Healthcare Speranza for two main reasons. First, he had a lot of experience in being administrator of healthcare institutions, and secondly, because Speranza knew he could trust him since they worked for many years together both in parliament and elsewhere. Well, as soon as he was appointed, this video came out of nowhere.
La mascherina non si fa assolutamente nulla. Le mascherine non servono a un cazzo, ve lo dico in inglese stretto, ok? E per beccarti il virus, se io fossi positivo, tu sai cosa devi fare? Devi stare con me e baciarmi per 15 minuti con la lingua in bocca.
As you can imagine, people did not like this at all. Zuccatelli defended himself, saying the video came out before people were certain of the efficiency of face masks, but turns out that it was actually in late May. Speranza had no choice but to ask him to resign. By this point, the media was thriving by writing article after article about this sorry event. It was certain that whoever was going to be the next commissioner was going to get the same treatment as the previous two by the media. The government asked Eugenio Gaudio, former head of the Sapienza University, to do it, but he refused, saying that his wife did not want to move to Catanzaro. Then they asked Gino Strada, someone who had a lot of experience with healthcare in Africa. He was also somewhat interested in the offer, but Antonio Spirli, who did not say anything until now, refused, saying that Calabria is not Africa and that it does not need to be treated as if it was. Keep in mind that people were dying and the healthcare system was about to crash, so it was probably not the right time for pride. As I'm writing this, Conte, with the aid of the rest of the ministers, put Guido Longo in charge just yesterday. As Conte announced on Twitter, the new Calabrian health commissioner is Prefect Guido Longo, a man of the institutions who has already worked in Calabria before, always in defense of the law. While I do not doubt Conte's judgment, only time will tell if Longo is going to do it. Starting from Sunday the 29th, Calabria will go from red zone to orange zone due to the drop in cases, but let's just hope things do not get worse. Lately I've been making longer videos, and even though I'm not doing it deliberately, I really appreciate you watching all the way through. Be sure to subscribe to know more, and yeah, I will see you next time.